I think we might have got it.
All right, that looks promising. Yeah, that's what I'm used to seeing up in the top left.
We can go ahead and commence. I'll just make sure we're in the background here.
Okay. Okay, I will call to order this Thursday, September 14th, 2023. I don't know why I almost said 2024. Meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission at 6:06 p.m. In attendance, we have Planning Commissioners Mikkel Layton, myself, Kaya Marienfeld, Jill Tatton, Carolyn Conant, and city staff and our City Council liaison, Luke Wojciechowski. First item of business is citizens to be heard. We do have a public hearing this evening that's coming up next. If you were here for the public hearing, which I believe most of you are, hang tight. Citizens to be heard is just for things that are not currently on the agenda. We did not receive any emails or other communications, just confirming for things that are not relating to the public hearing tonight.
No, we did not.
Okay. Okay. Should we move to the next item, have a little preface and then open the public hearing?
Yes.
Does that work for you?
Let me just conclude my, it's still not, we're streaming, but it's not showing up on YouTube. So let me
Okay.
just make sure Summer has it.
Sounds good.
It is streaming now.
All right.
Perfect.
Thanks, Luke.
Okay. Summer sees it as well.
I know it's always freezing.
Okay.
All right.
Get out of there. Okay. So just a really
Yeah.
brief introduction on my end about
Real quick. Item number 3 is a public hearing of ordinance number 2023-13, an ordinance of the City Council of Moab amending the text of the Moab Municipal Code, section 17.36020, to amend the permitted uses and regulations in the I-1 Industrial Zoning District, to relax the zoning requirements for self-storage warehouse developments, and to add the permitted use for kennels, both indoor or outdoor. We will open the public hearing in a minute, but first we will have a little intro and preface from our planning director, Corey Shurtleff.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Discussing more about this process and what the application for a zoning text amendment would include. For our commission members, especially, having gone through what would be a city initiated text amendment, it goes through as far as the amendments or how that ordinance is being constructed, a little bit of a different framework or different process, meaning we're typically workshopping that in a series of meetings prior to bringing it through a public hearing and then advancing that to city council. And then even then there might be amendments being organized, being remanded back to planning commission and then back up to city council until it's at a sufficient level for the city council to make either its amendments and then approve or so on. What we have here is under the criteria for development code amendments within our municipal structure, text amendments are an option for that. The other category that is most similar would be like a rezone or a zoning map amendment. So this, rather than amending the zoning itself, either where it's located or what the boundaries are, it's the actual text or language within that particular zone or any language within the municipal code for that matter. The qualification for that really is simply if you're a citizen of Moab, you are eligible to advance an application for that item and can really apply to the planning commission and then on to city council for whatever amendments you would like. So this is not something that, and the clarification will in the future, I think, try to make this more clear, both with rezone or zoning map amendments and text amendments when it is a city initiated amendment, meaning it's something that from time to time the city's obligation is to revise its code and bring it up into compliance or further standards within state statutes. But is the option for our citizens to actually participate in the construction of these regulations. So this application was applicant submitted and then run through the process for notifying and then being presented really for the first time during this public hearing context to have a recommendation from planning commission made, and then it goes on to city council. That is to say, we don't really have editing or direct amendment capacities, nor does staff. So what you're seeing on this agenda summary, maybe somewhat differently than what we did with the landscaping, is you have what the ordinance has been submitted as, or the materials that were submitted. Then you have a staff recommendation and then some of the justifications housed within that staff report. And then what we'll have is a planning commission recommendation. So all those will be 3 separate categories that get sent to city council. Now, all 3 of these can align, either aspects can align, or some can be, all 3 can be different. So my point is tonight is that depending on the discussion that happens, the planning commission can make a recommendation with modification, the typical options for approval or denial or tabling that we typically have. But the recommendation is where we can put a little bit more specific language towards the city council. So when they read your recommendation, they can contrast to what is the applicants are proposing. But at this time is an opportunity as well for the applicants to have a conversation with you of possible modifications or mitigations into the language being proposed that they can edit from now until when it goes to city council. So there is still opportunity. It has to come on behalf of the applicant. So I'm hoping that that structure is more or less clear. And of course, we can always dive into the more specifics of the code if we have any questions, but that I think covers process and structure.
Question.
Yes.
If in the course of figuring things out and talking to the applicants tonight, there are changes that the applicants decide that they want to make, do they have to come back through you guys, or can that just be, here's what the planning commission recommends, the applicant is fine with it, or with some modification, and that goes straight to city council as is, or does it need to come back?
We may, depending on the scope or significance of the change, we may consult with our attorneys on the fine tooth comb of that. But as we've seen, documents can continue to kind of amend all the way up until approval. I think the essence of what our statutory requirements are for public hearings and citizen opportunity is that the substantive body of the ordinance is maintained. So if that substantive point is changed, amended, or we get to a different place where, well, the public didn't really have an opportunity to comment on this new concept.
Yeah.
That's where we might be running into issues. So in this context, I doubt that we'll run into an area where it will need to come back for a public hearing or come back for planning commission approval. What it might come with is whatever the recommendation planning commission comes up with. And then staff might amend its staff report to facilitate what other additional comments if language is changed. Good, really great question, because that is kind of an
I
odd
honestly can't
area.
remember the last time we've done this.
Applicant driven text amendment. I think we've
Had
had
some
a number of
flourish.
applications, but
Yeah.
nobody actually coming through the
Actually
full
coming through, yeah.
process, right?
We've had a couple, how about
At
this?
least-
And us going,
Yeah, I think certainly not in the last three years.
Yeah.
Maybe one previously, but maybe not even 5. Anyway,
not in the last 5, as far
Yeah.
as I know. Okay. All right. All that said, commissioners, new and old, please do not hesitate to ask questions. I think it's really helpful for the public just hearing us work through the process too. If we don't understand what's going on, I want to make sure that we're being clear about that. So please don't hesitate. I will do the same thing. That said, we will open the public hearing on ordinance number 2023-13, which is item 3.1 on our agenda tonight at 6:14 PM. So what we will do is, I think we did receive 2 public comments electronically via email or through the city's comment portal. We can address those maybe after hearing from folks who are here in person, just in the interest of being respectful of folks' time. Was it 2? Are we doing 2 minutes? Gosh, it's been a minute since I've asked.
3 is council's current.
Okay, cool. So if you would like to come make a comment, the applicant or anybody else, or both, approach the microphone. Please say your name, clearly so that our recorder can get that down in the record. And then try to keep it to 3 minutes the best you can. If it's over a little bit, there aren't a bunch of people chomping at the bit to talk, that's fine. I'm okay with it. So.
And to clarify, if following the public hearing, following the brief,
Yes.
the applicants, if the commission has additional questions, will they be asked to come back up for those
Yeah,
questions?
if-
Okay,
If that's all right.
I think just the way that they may frame those
Yep.
discussions, they'll hit their high points and then come in
Totally.
for details maybe later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
And we did have a question about this in a past public hearing. I think there was some confusion, which is valid, about members of the public being allotted less time than the applicant, is how it seemed
Mhm.
in a public hearing. And I think there was some consternation over that. And I think
Sure.
just explaining that, like, the applicant is here as a sort of a question and answer format,
Yes.
given exchange. It's
From-
not that they're be giving more time in the
Yeah,
public
it's the
hearing,
commission's request.
Yeah.
If we want to hear from them at all.
Yes.
That's right.
but that is worth clarifying.
I don't think we're here for public comment, so just be offered question and answer. and try
Sure,
to, like,
sure.
Situation, try and come to a celebrate what would be best.
Great.
So we can place it that way and
Yeah,
kind of out.
sure.
So it sounds like, so the folks in the audience are the applicant
Yes,
team. There's nobody else in the audience
Okay,
besides the applicant
great.
team.
So maybe
Um,
we'll address.
We can say, okay, any other comments?
Yeah.
No, but I think we should address during the public comment or public hearing period, the comments.
Correct. All right, we can do that. So yeah, just to clarify, the folks in the audience are the applicants or part of the applicant team, and so they aren't going to speak during the public hearing, but are here to answer questions during the discussion period. So we'll have them come up. Circling back, we did receive 2 written comments regarding the public hearing tonight to be a part of the record. One of those comments was from Susie Harrington, who lives over on Cane Creek, sort of adjacent, as the crow flies over the wetlands, from, I think, the applicant's property, whose primary, and Corey, help me if I'm not summarizing this correctly. The overarching request was forwarding for the planning commission to forward a negative recommendation on the ordinance because the proposed changes fail to meet text amendment approval criteria, D, E, G, and H, and some interpretations of C within the text amendment code. The comment being that zoning maps reflect the development on the ground at the time they were adopted, not always something that's planned what we want to see in the future in a particular area. Noting that the one of the larger portions of this zone currently is adjacent to a much larger area of residential and agricultural zone and a nature preserve. The trend in the neighborhood is toward higher density residential development, which is a high need. And the county and the city are engaged in the future land use planning process. So considering the request in the contents of future land use, not expanding uses in this zone. Saying that the city general plan goal 1 advises that coordinate, cooperate with Grand County on the zoning for light industry, business parks, and desirable commercial land uses for which suitable sites may not be readily located in one or the other jurisdiction. And noting that this might be one of those things where it's not so much located within city limits anymore, and to coordinate with the other jurisdiction being Grand County. Also noting that the county highway commercial zone allows self-storage units, which is one of the uses we're discussing tonight in the proposed revisions. And saying that because of this, self-storage modifications don't meet criteria G, which is providing options in terms of economic development in the city's general plan. Am I missing things? And then on to the kennel, noting adverse impacts on neighboring properties and whether or not it's in the public interest, citing again the general plan policy to seek to reduce noise levels so residents can enjoy their property and provide pleasant environment for businesses and visitors. Noise is an issue. The commenter lives within earshot of this zone. She noted that she hears the hum of the wastewater treatment plant. I think she called it a gentle hum. I used to live over in that area. I will reckon that that was a gentle hum. And then saying, I've lived in rural areas where people kept dogs outside, which would bay for hours at all times of day and night. Outdoor kennels, I feel, would not be in the public interest. Please don't harm the ability to enjoy the quiet we have left. I don't think there's anywhere in the city or possibly Spanish Valley where the impacts of an outside kennel justify public purposes relative to inside kennels, was the base of her comment. Sorry, we're going into these quite a bit, I think, just because we don't have anyone who's here in person.
Mhm.
All right. that was the first one. The next comment. Where did it go? Was submitted through our public comment form by Casey Montandan. I will actually just read this one because it's short. Saying regarding zone changes and permitted uses in industrial zoning, I'd like to discourage a change of the current code, mainly on the subject of indoor and outdoor kennels. I'm the property manager of the land adjacent to 1053 West, 400 North. My wife and I both reside on the property. This end of town, also next to the wetlands, is one of the last few quiet areas in Moab. The zoning change could drastically change the neighborhood if there were to be any sort of boarding outdoor kennels allowed. While the intentions may be good, the sounds of multiple dogs barking through the day and night in a residential neighborhood would change and affect the quality of living in this area for everyone. Regarding storage units, it would also increase traffic on a road that people already tend to speed on and has multiple people walking to and from the wetlands area. Both humans and animals near the wetlands would appreciate that there be no change in the zoning ordinances. Thank you. So those were the two public comments that we received. Great. Did anybody else discuss anything with anyone reviewing this? So like, it's not official, but it's always relevant. So, all right. That said, I will close the public hearing at 6:21 PM. And we can move on to the next item, which is a potential action item on this issue that we just had the public hearing on. And this would be the time that we might want to hear from the applicants. Maybe just sort of walk through kind of where I personally, maybe other commissioners would love to know if it's an all or nothing type thing with what's being proposed, if there are potential changes to be made. And maybe if that's so, we could work through that in the context of some of the comments and staff recommendations as well. I don't know if you saw it in the packet, but staff as of right now has so far recommended we do not forward the kennel aspect onto city council. But they have made a positive recommendation on the rest. So
Before we, I think, get into the applicant aspects, because I think that's where a majority of the discussion would be. I
Mhm.
think given, especially
Oh,
there may
yes,
be
thank
people
you.
viewing, the briefing might help set the landscape.
yes,
at
it would.
least.
Thank you,
Okay.
Corey.
Okay. And then
Oh,
Anna
okay.
has our presentation.
Okay, so, yes, we are just, I just wanted to kind of give you guys the layout as far as where the industrial zones are in the city. And then, just basically what we already said about and, adding the permitted use of kennels and then doing some, amendment to the storage warehouse use to make it less restrictive. What the applicant is requesting is to lower the 10-foot setbacks or buffer requirements because the industrial zone itself does not have setback requirements on the side yards. And then our rear yard, and then to remove the minimum and maximum lot size requirements for self-storage warehouses. And then remove the requirement for the total area coverage, not to, so it cannot exceed 50%. Remove the maximum height limit of buildings being used and deferred to what is allowed in the I-1 zone, and that's 40 feet, unless it's adjacent to a residential zone, and then that does stay. The 20-foot limit does stay in the ordinance for that. And then as far as the remove the height limit for the outdoor storage of boats and large vehicles. That would also just be something that we would go back to what is allowed in the I-1 zone of 40 feet unless adjacent to a residential zoning district. And then remove the section of the ordinance that says that only self-storage warehouses would be allowed on the property. And, you know, there could be a potential for a mixed use development on properties that have self-storage warehouse uses in the industrial zone.
With that, to clarify, because we've had confusion in the past with DRT, mixed use meaning mixed use commercial of uses permitted in the zone, not the more broader mixed
residential.
use meaning residential and office space. Mixed commercial use of anything that would be acceptable in the zone. We're
Or-
not proposing.
Or just mixed any use of things in the zone, because there's some non-commercial.
Sure,
in the industrial.
yes,
Okay,
anything that's
that was gonna
permitted,
be my
Yeah.
question.
yes,
Yeah.
and sorry,
So you could have a self-storage in a rail yard.
if you like a rail yard,
Yeah.
we can,
Without-
we can look
would
into
be
the
a big
development
leap.
standards.
Don't freak out, people listening at home, that's not what we're talking about, but it could happen in the zone.
Thank
And
you.
then to add the use of kennels.
Yes.
So staff is recommending that we do, basically, we reduce the buffer requirements if it's adjacent to another industrial zone property to 5 feet. And that we remove the lot size requirement altogether so that there isn't going to be a minimum or maximum lot requirement for a self-storage warehouse. And that the lot coverage, there's no limit to self-storage warehouse at 50%. That it just defers to what is allowed in the industrial zone. And there is no limit in the industrial zoning district. And then I'm sorry. And then the height limit is differs to what's allowed in the zoning district of 40 feet unless adjacent to a residential zone. And then we would just remove the no outside storage of vehicles or boats limitation. And then we would also remove no business activity other than the rental of storage units shall be conducted on the premises.
Quick clarification with the titling of this. When it is reading a staff recommended ordinance changes, what I'd like to clarify is the applicant submitted
Yes.
what I'll more roughly call kind of plain language amendments. We'd like to see this change in the ordinance. What we're saying here is we translated those into the actual
Ordinance.
municipal formats. So this isn't, we're not generating these as a staff recommendation of changes. These are the applicant's changes in the staff's language format. Is that clear? Okay.
Yep.
And then we are recommending not to add the kennel use at this time. We are going to be doing a total ordinance overhaul for the city, and then at that time would be an appropriate way of adding or allowing or not allowing certain uses in certain zones. And that's gonna require a whole lot more comprehensive, detailed analysis than what we're doing here. So that's why we're not recommending that right now. And so I just wanted to also show as far as where all of the industrial zones are and what the surrounding zoning districts are and uses and that type of thing with as they relate to how the ordinance changes are going to be made. And so if you have any questions about the proximities, please let me know. If not, we can go ahead and continue.
Actually, I do have a question. about
Okay,
that.
sure.
In the potential code changes, there are a couple things that are contingent on not being adjacent to a residential zone.
Yeah.
Does RA1 count as a residential zone?
Yes, that is a residential agricultural zone.
In that as well, we want to, and maybe this will become a discussion with
Well,
our
and that was the
attorneys,
thing is it wouldn't even apply to this parcel.
is adjacency
It
is
would
mean
apply to,
property boundaries, right of ways are separations of adjacency.
Okay.
We can have an attorney clarify that. That's the current understanding, at least as far as current buffering standards go. So roadways, other right of way or separation aspects.
Okay.
But if a border, meaning the zone boundary is consistent with a private property to private property, that's an adjacency that would be a consideration here.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification.
any other questions from anyone?
Not so far.
Okay. And so I know Kaya, you had asked for examples of what 40
Yes.
foot buildings look like. And so these are just buildings that are in the city that are already 40 feet. You also have to keep in mind that in the industrial zone, there is the 25-foot front yard setback requirement that would still be put in place. So, none of these buildings would be right up close to the street like some of these are, like the Radcliffe and you know, and it probably wouldn't be the, you know, the best place at this point to have buildings right up against the road.
Mhm.
And so do you have any questions about this one?
Could you go back actually to acreage? That was really interesting.
The acreage?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah.
So there, this is really useful because currently in a code, there is one parcel where you could have a self-storage unit.
Three-
Yeah.
Or
because-
sorry, I'm sorry, excuse me, there's one that's over the limit. There's like 3 where you could actually have one that are between that 2 and 5 acres.
Yes,
Yes.
that's right.
Them are owned by the city of Moab.
So, yeah, this really does limit the use, and self-storage warehouse is more of a commercial use than an industrial use.
Yeah.
So if it's in an industrial zone, it's like a very light industrial use.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a whole lot more uses that could be more impactful than a
Mhm.
self-storage.
Yeah.
And then again, here's the examples around the city of 40-foot tall buildings. And so staff recommends that advancing the amendments to the self-storage warehouse permitted use and then does not recommend including the added permitted use kennels.
Great, thank you. All right. Question,
So that we're viewing, if you'll exit shared screen, we'll probably bring it back up.
Okay,
That way, YouTube will be able to view the chamber during discussion.
okay, my first question is, do we need to spend time discussing with you all the kennel aspect, or can we sort of move past that for the
We are
conversation
actively
tonight?
interested in having the kennels in there.
You what?
We are actively interested in
Okay.
the potential of kennels.
Okay.
There's an active need for it.
I'm so
Um,
sorry, Rachel. For kind of the
Yeah,
full
real quick,
introduction, I think
if-
we're about to enter. Would you state names? I think names is
Sorry about that.
appropriate.
Yeah, just try to speak into the mic when possible.
I'm Charlene Abbott. I'm actually the person that submitted the applicant.
Great.
And yeah, I think our proposals, we found that there is a great need. I grew up in Moab. I'm familiar with the community. This is my home. And the property that we have particularly, we didn't want to just make it specifically about our property. We felt like, it should include all the other industrial zone, but ours in particular, I mean, the sewer plant's right next to us. I would love to have a 40-foot building on that, but nobody's proposed that. We just want to make sure that there's some applications. And I think it would all come down to site plan for anybody that wanted to build a storage unit. When we decided that's too much property for us. We're getting 70 years old and, we got a big field out there and it's a lot of work. So we're ready to move on into a smaller area. When we decided we wanted to sell it, and we contacted Rachel and her company, Berkshire, we found out the property was industrial. I've been receiving property tax notices for years and years and years, and they always said residential. I had no idea that our property was industrial, ever. And so that was a kind of a surprise. I was appreciative that they brought that to our attention. So right away, we started getting offers, but most of those people wanted to offer for storage units, not a ton of them.
Interesting, yeah.
I mean, if somebody wanted to build 4 or 5 on there, or if they want whatever.
Yeah.
But that was the majority of the offers on the property. And of course, it didn't meet the criteria because of the acreage.
Yep.
And we are, all around us is industrial.
And I'm Rachel Moody. I am helping Charlene with her property, and there's a tremendous amount of discovery that we've had with her property in particular. She's kind of beholden to the city code right now with this property. It's very difficult for her to move on because she has a home on a 1-acre property that is zoned industrial, so she's a legal non-conforming use. She cannot, you can't get a residential loan on it because it's a legal non-conforming use in an industrial zone. So selling it to somebody as a residential property is very difficult. And then as far as trying to sell it for an industrial purpose, the majority of people who are interested in it are interested in storage units. That has been 95% of the interest. There's only 3 properties in all of the industrial code that it meets the criteria of storage units.
Yeah.
So we felt like the acreage was just too excessive, and we felt like this was a good location for storage units considering its proximity to other residential uses that could potentially use storage, even if it's for RVs, trailers, or something to that regard. But we also have a very active interest for a local nonprofit that would like to relocate into this location, that we think would be a really good fit for them. Number one, there's smells that come from the sewer plant. So smells from dogs would not be any worse than what you're already smelling down there. There is definitely a constant sound from the sewer plant that impacts the surrounding area. It is zoned industrial. I understand that there could be concern about the noise, whether or not you need to remove the ability for outdoor kennels. Maybe it could be some sort of way that you could say indoor and outdoor, but the dogs have to be inside after a certain amount of time. But I do think that there's someone who's very, very needy that we all support in this community that would really like to purchase this property if it's possible. And we'd like to know what you will allow and what you would approve for dog kennels in order to support that nonprofit if they were able to purchase this property. I think that's what we'd like to say in that regard. We don't want to disturb the neighborhood. I live not too far from here. So as far as where Miss Harrington is located, I'm just the same amount of distance, just north, not south. It would be hard to have barking dogs all night long, but if there's some way that you can come with an agreement of, look at what's happening with the animal shelter. The animal shelter is in a residential area as well, and that's on city property. Is that something that you want to have the same sort of model? I know that that's a public facility, but it's also a dog kennel with barking dogs as well, and it's serving the community well. So can other people. I can understand that there's probably other areas of the industrial zone that might not be appropriate for what that use in particular, but there's definitely other industrial parcels like near the King Creek condos that has been for sale that is perfect for storage units, considering all of those new condos that have just been put in that don't have any storage. So it'd be really helpful for them as well. But I don't know how you could potentially, I don't think that that would be the right location either, quite frankly, for a dog kennel. So how can you make it so that there's some sort of variable use that you could make with the dog kennels? I don't know if you have any concerns about the storage units that you'd like us to address or possibly modify, but we'd really like to be open to a conversation about the kennels to see if we can give this potential purchaser an idea of whether or not this is even an option for them.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just taking notes. Yeah, maybe I'll just start and then y'all can jump in. It seemed like with folks that I talked to, and certainly with the comment letters that we received and discussion with city staff and with the city staff's recommendation, that the dog kennels seem to be the bigger lift, honestly. And I think I agree with that. And I think for the reason that Anna stated is that I was also just emailing today about sending out an RFQ for someone to engage in overhauling our entire zoning code, which is just about to happen. And that will be the time where we can say, I think it was Susie that pointed out in her email, like, you look at the city zones and you're like, this doesn't make a ton of sense.
We have a pig farm on this property and you couldn't say
Yeah.
anything about it. Not
Totally.
one
Yeah.
thing.
No, absolutely. But just looking for, keeping in mind that adding entirely new things that aren't already listed in the underlying code is something that I think there's less of an appetite for right now, just because that's pending. Whereas the storage units are something that are already allowed in the zone, and looking at the acreage, looking at the size, looking at the feasibility, and understanding that, like, actually that's not really feasible, even though it's in the code right now as an allowed use, is something that, at least for me, is a much easier thing to sort of tackle and address and make happen.
I do want to point out that in the commercial residential zone, C2, it allows indoor kennels with a veterinarian clinic, which I think is a heck of a lot more impactful to a residential area than what we're trying to add to an industrial zone next to a sewer plant.
I don't see that there's a residential impact. We have industrial all around us. Next to us, just east of us, is a manufacturing plant, and you're getting noise from that continually. I'm always asking my husband, what's happening? I mean, it's like lightning and thunder.
I
noise.
know.
And we hear dogs constantly. There's dogs all around us, across the street in that residential area. But on the other side of the sewer plant is a ton of dogs. But like she said, we could burn tires on that plant down that road. I mean, on our property, you could have a pig farm, howling animals of any kind. But how much better to have them enclosed?
If I can as well, with, in light of the comments that we did receive during the public hearing, the written comments, that was what I'm suggesting. I think a lot of the critique there was about the zoning location,
Mhm.
not so much about the uses within the zone, because I do want to, from the staff perspective,
Yeah.
identify that within the zoning districts, which is a focus, we have to keep that in mind. So a lot of these critiques, when they're kind of, I think, challenging the fact that has a high impact to residential zones, that's an absolutely valid discussion. Maybe not so much about particular uses in the zone, but the zone in general. But again, those comments ought to be addressed during this rewrite, where we are not only evaluating uses, but evaluating the zones themselves. Which is a slightly different commentary than I think what the applicants are saying, which is particular to the uses available at this moment, which we do have control over, maybe is the different discussion. So just in particular to many of Susie's comments, where she's approaching it from the general plan and saying, these don't meet the standards for text amendments. I think we need to be sure that we're asking the questions in the right context to answer, are these compliant within the framework? And I think Anna's staff report demonstrates the staff's response in that. So that, sorry to plug in there, but
Yeah,
just wanted to add that
absolutely.
little bit of a commentary.
Which is ultimately where I come down. It's the adding a new use into a zone just in general right now. And that's really it. Whereas the self-storage, I think, for me, not right now, not having had a discussion or heard from other commissioners, there's a couple things proposed where I might have a tweak or just a recommendation. But otherwise, I think self-storage, I used to live 2 blocks away. I just sold my house in Portal Vista 2 months ago. So I know the area really well. I lived there for a long time. I know the hum of the treatment plant. I know the quiet otherwise though, in that area. So I do understand that. But I do think that would be a great spot for people. We do need more storage. We do need more boat storage. There's people who want to buy a Murphy Flats unit who have a raft, who don't have a place to put the raft because they're living in a studio, and we want to make things like that work. Whereas there's like a 20-year waiting list for every storage unit in town right now. So that is great to hear that there's been interest, and I will say I'm very interested in making that work. In this zone is just kind of where I am, and I would love to hear from other commissioners now.
Well, and it's kind of a plus when you think we have the house on the property.
Mhm.
So if you're gonna be a storage unit manager.
Oh,
you got a
yeah.
Place to live.
Well, and that's great. And that was my question. Are they legal non-conforming, or are they the industrial structure with a caretaker unit?
During the site plan, we will have to refine that out. And
Okay.
we've had some preliminary concept discussions with
Okay,
quite a few
cool.
folks already.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in the industrial zone, caretaker is a standalone use, which is kind of unique given a caretaker to what, given it's a standalone
Exactly.
use.
Yeah.
But caretaker is permitted.
Yep.
Currently, a residential unit, which is a slightly different definition than a
Yeah.
caretaker, because there's an association there.
Yeah.
With the use. So the answer is that it could work. I'm not saying it will. Is that fair to say? That yes. So the legal non-conforming aspect, I don't want to write that off. That is an important notion to understand, is when we're, again, in the comments, identifying this as a residential area. When we think about Moab, you can't in any one particular place throw a stone without maybe hitting one or two other different zones.
Yeah.
And different characteristics, because we are so tight. But we do, as a municipality, have to look from a broader view perspective of housing appropriately all the needs the city needs, which is our municipal obligation. So this maybe talks more to annexation, that I understand. If we need more space, we need to be thinking about broadening our city limits. But from what we have now, we have to fit everything within this boundary.
Yeah.
So finding places for the right things to go.
Totally.
Yeah, and with this being industrial, if you're aware, I mean, it doesn't allow residential.
Yeah.
So, other people who are thinking of wanting to put employee housing, it's just not an option for them. So
Well,
that we're really strict.
That's
on what
actually
we can do here.
maybe my auxiliary question, just, and you feel free to, it's maybe irrelevant. I'm curious why y'all went the zone wide change versus just a zone change on that property or adding something.
I think if I can take this question, because again, we had coordinated with the applicants. This was
yeah.
our suggestion, given the criteria.
This
a-
seems a heavier lift than just an individual
Sure,
property.
An individual zone amendment or individual property amendment to a zone.
Yeah,
Would be essentially contract zoning. So we have certain statute.
no, I mean like
limitations.
saying
If we did a
we wanted-
development agreement.
we want to change it to RA1,
Oh,
like a zone change.
would
literally
have been
just a
an
zone.
option.
Yeah.
Yes, so sorry, I
Yeah.
misunderstood the question.
But we're
A zone
located
change
next
to a
a sewer
different
plant. That's
Zone,
it's a big.
but I will say to what zone?
Yeah.
I think we would have probably had similar objections, at least from DRT, because earlier I made that clarification about mixed use.
Yeah.
Our development review team, being all the development entities within the city, had a lot of reactions about residential being proposed in this area. So regardless of zone, they didn't care
So
about
weird.
uses. They were worried about more housing going into this particular site. So
Hmm.
in that sense,
Interesting.
could they have? Yes, but I think they would have been up against maybe similar, different, but a similar level of intensity of opposition.
Yeah. There's
a
a bunch of
different way.
R4 like 200 feet away.
And that's again, back to we're talking proximity, which is
Yeah.
something I'd like to get away from, and why I said, from a certain perspective, I think
course.
it's your job to have that purview. But from the staff's perspective, to say, we're analyzing what is in the zone and what should be permitted based on the purpose and character statements. That's
Yep.
our, I guess, from the general plan and the individual zoning, that's how we're making our recommendations. We understand there's a whole nother human aspect.
Yeah.
But that's not what the staff recommendations are meant to reflect. That's what the planning commission's recommendations are meant to reflect. So about proximity, that's a really hard argument, because you could argue similar about our central commercial zone to our low residential
Yeah.
adjacency is
Of course,
the same thing, which you wouldn't see in bigger, more expansive communities.
totally.
But that wasn't a contemplated option, I think, because I think on behalf of staff, we did not suggest that. Identifying that would have created different issues.
Yeah.
In a different way versus adapting the existing zoning to accommodate what might be viable uses.
Totally.
I almost found it a positive when Rachel told us we were industrial, because it's not attractive place to live,
Yeah.
residents anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to have people come out and sit on our patio in the evening and listen to the snow noise and the smell. It's not attractive.
Yeah.
It used to be beautiful. I mean, the surrounding trees, and it was nice, but once the sewer plant got put in there, that's when people come to visit us. It's almost embarrassing to take them outdoors. It gets so bad, especially in the summer, not in
Yeah.
December, because you
Yeah.
don't have all the people here visiting, but this summer it's really difficult. So it's not, I wouldn't, want to put other people in that position.
Yeah.
To have to live there.
Which is why I think self-storage is a
absolutely.
really good option there.
Yeah.
Like
and you don't
really.
have a lot of traffic with storage units. They
Yeah,
Put their
no.
stuff there, and once in a while, I mean, I've always had storage units. I
Yeah.
visit them very seldom, so it's not like there's a lot of
Yeah.
traffic down that road. It's
Yeah.
a dead end.
Yeah. I'll say, and my biggest things are like, especially having lived just a block away for such a long time. It really, and I do count it as one of the like last dark and quiet places within Moab city limits. It's kind of wild. You don't know what's down there. People don't drive past it. There's not a lot of lights and traffic, and it's great. And I think obviously that's not our legal responsibility, but just understanding that is sort of the character of that part of town, like weird smells in the summer aside, you give and you get, I'd take the quiet and a whiff of the river and the treatment plant. Just, and then having, I think that's one of the things, with the kennels too, with the wetlands being so adjacent to, and potentially some, interplay with that. I know there's barking dogs down there with residences and everything too. But I think, personally, I think making sure that the already existing allowed use in that zone is feasible, is a really good thing that we should be doing. So maybe starting there and then figuring other stuff out. But I want to hear from other commissioners kind of where they're at, just maybe with kennels in general, in the zone. If that's something you're open to taking into account the letters from the public, the applicant and staff recommendations, and then your thoughts on self-storage and trying to make something within there more feasible for the applicant. And then, of course, because it is a zone-wide change being proposed, understanding that everything we saw on the map could feasibly in the future be a place where anything that we're opening up could happen, which is something I just want to make sure everyone's keeping in mind.
Can I make a comment about that?
Sure.
If there's any way that you can, if you need to adjust your recommendation, I don't know, it would be talking with Corey, but you know, your industrial uses are kind of broken up into 3 different sections of the city. So is there a way of maybe like mapping out different portions of industrial to say that this would be allowed in this section of industrial, but not this section of industrial? I don't know if
I
that's
don't think we can
possible.
do that. I think they'd need to
As
be
Part of
different
this
zones.
action, we,
Yeah,
which is again, a discussion even prior to
Yeah.
this applicant has been identified as,
we talk about the I zone all the time as being like the thing that's slowly dying off as we like sort of look at our code in the city, which is where this sort of caught my.
yeah, that
Aye.
with this, it would come from a zoning text amendment,
Mhm.
excuse me, a zoning map amendment where we were actually generating new zones.
Yeah.
So again, it would be part of our general code rewrite to say, okay, we have these 3 different industrial zones. It would be a more complex action to not only isolate those different polygons of the map, but give them new zoning agency and then parameters
Yeah.
within. So right now we have industrial I1 industrial zone. The easy transition would be an I1, I2, and I3, just like we have commercial zones. The
Mhm.
I1 might be over here, totally different characteristics than the I2, which would be over there.
Mhm,
Again, that's a bigger lift,
mhm.
more or less associated with what we're trying to accomplish with the general code rewrite. As far as the recommendations go, the applicant team and the commission could generate use parameters of a kennel that would be organized more broad, similar to what we're seeing within the self-storage. So it wouldn't be able to be locationally designated.
Mm.
I don't think there's a mechanism, and we don't have an attorney on staff to help me clarify that. But you could do essentially by property mitigation, and if that would be a sufficient action, something like that would be acceptable, but not, I don't think that we have the ability to action that at this time.
Yeah.
To separate those by property.
And when we do the total ordinance rewrite, we can add like, maybe separate the types of industrial zones. Light industrial versus heavy industrial,
Mhm.
figure out what sections of the city that works the best. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to hold off adding any other
Yeah.
permitted uses at this time.
Yes.
And actually, I think it's very understandable to change a code if you're about a residential. If that was residential next to me, if I shared a property line with
Mhm.
residential, that would make a difference of what I would want to put on.
Yeah,
the
what you'd
property
want
too.
to do. Yeah.
But we don't have that.
All right. Cal, you want to start?
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, if the uses change in the industrial zones, say City of Moab decides to take their public works area somewhere else, that industrial area can be rezoned.
Or reused or
It could be any of these industrial zones could change. As the use changes, the zoning could change. The owner of the parcel could request a zone change. Something different.
Yes. Every property owner or even citizen has the ability to request a text amendment or zoning map amendment. A zoning map amendment to a particular property is acceptable. We've seen some of those in the past where either there's an adjacency and they're on the border and they're zoned on the less attractive side. They want to be zoned on the more attractive side. So we've seen that many times. We've also seen where there are, I won't call spot zoning, that has some kind of attributes that maybe aren't, but isolated zoning where a particular property not contiguous with other districts. We've seen those proposed. Some have been successful, most have not, but it really depends upon the narrative of which I think they're being approached. But the short answer is yes. Every property could
That
petition
under
for
the
a zone
right
change.
circumstances, these industrial zones could be change to residential.
That's true.
depending On their use.
That's
and their
true.
location.
That's true. Yes.
I mean, yeah, feasibly any zone could be changed.
Right.
By the property owner.
Right.
Requested.
That was question number one. I have a question about this strike through of no business activity other than the rental of storage units shall be conducted on the premises.
So that was so that we can include a mixed use type of industrial mixed use scenario with any use that has a self-storage warehouse. Right now,
Can you give me an
self-storage-
example of what that would be?
You could have
Right.
half the property self-storage, you have the other half, other half of the property professional office
Or pig farm.
or pig farm or train depot. Not what's being proposed for anybody. But those are in the code currently, yes.
For a salvage yard.
So just
Just right
using my
next to it.
imagination.
Yeah.
This could open this up to other things going on in storage units
No.
other than self-storage.
No, it could be like parts, it could be like
Just
half the
share-
property is like little storage units and the other half is like
An office building.
or like
Right.
a microbrewery.
The uses would have to be separated. They would not be
Yeah.
integrated, saying
Okay.
things are happening in the storage unit would not be acceptable.
open a
Nobody's
pop-up
approved.
shop.
Nothing's happening in this.
No, that would be unacceptable.
Pop-up shop in the storage unit.
No, unless they went through a mixed use and developed through a site plan and building code and health department, everything they need to
But that
do
would be an
to
example. of mixed
incorporate
use.
a mixed use building or commercial building with that has components of those acceptable uses. Yeah.
So like when you're asking whether they rented a storage unit and want to do car repairs in it or build cabinets or something in the storage unit?
Yeah, I'm just using my imagination to see how this no business activity.
Yeah.
What is the business activity that could then? So it would be.
No, your
use-
your storage units would have to be storage units, but then on the same site plan, you could have another structure that could be a mechanic shop. But your storage units are for storage. They're
Mhm.
not for anything aside from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But on the same site plan, you could have like,
Which would bring the parking and
the whole site plan would have to be in compliance with
Mhm.
the
the
entire.
business type stuff to there. Okay.
Right, right.
Whereas like right now, someone could buy it and maybe just put a auto shop or something. And there's a lot, it's hard because just like with self-storage, there's a lot of requirements for those individual uses that are already allowed within the I zone as far as
Right.
things go. So
Right.
it's odd to me that self-storage is like so specific.
It's-
Well-
That's what.
And have
confused
so much
us
land.
about it,
Yeah.
Because
There-
agriculture is.
I'm
no
kind of like,
problem.
why?
Farms are no
Yeah.
Problem, it's rail yards, no problem.
Yeah.
Refinery, no problem.
We could drill for oil and gas on that.
So with that, and again, specifically, maybe not so much to those what maybe call more wild
Yeah.
uses that have no parameters. I think that's really understandable. Originally, when they're developing these zones, they probably used a framework from another municipality
Yeah.
and copy and pasted in what were bulk uses.
Totally.
Along the development of our municipal code, it is likely that, and because this use is in verbatim associated in other zones, self-storage in this full use parameter context, say in the C4 zone, for example, has
Mhm.
all the same exact mitigation requirements, is I think an eye-opening aspect of it. At some point in the past, there was probably a particular event or situation among land use in the city where the administration or whoever it was at the time, the city council, felt necessary to go to this extent of adding these use parameters and restrictions and regulation onto this particular use in excess compared to what are some of these more wild uses that don't have any. So it's clearly a juxtaposition of how does this happen?
Yeah.
Where we're at with our staff recommendation now is what we're analyzing off of the situation we're in today.
Yep.
We don't have any of that residual purposing of why they would have to this level put use parameter on self-storage. So what we're saying now is, okay, through fresh eyes, we're trying to, or we're doing is accepting and recommending as proposed those changes that are within the packet because they are bringing that use into more consistency with the other uses around it. An example, a warehouse could be built to 40 feet. A self-storage unit could not currently. To an observer, a neighbor, 40 feet's 40 feet, doesn't matter what they're doing in, for the most part. Obviously, there's exceptions to that, but a structure of 40 feet and a structure, it doesn't matter really, it's a wall.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of the critiques that we're getting, a lot of criticism and some of the chasing into the threads of these things is maybe issues with the zone. So if we have problem with 40 feet, that's a zone issue, not a use issue. Because what we would see is if when a use becomes too restrictive or unviable, it's not even feasible, people will go to an alternate. And oftentimes, especially in this case, some of those alternates have 0 parameters.
Yeah.
So we might be pushing out what might be a useful, viable option towards
Yes.
a less viable option that actually has worse mitigation options. So
Yeah.
at least as far as the recommendation, that's why our stance is to advance this adjustment as it brings it into
Yes.
more compliance.
Totally makes sense. And that's, and I'll talk more later, but there was another thing I was thinking about with the kennels is that kennel, I looked through the code, indoor kennels, just indoor only, like you mentioned, like maybe adjacent, it says adjacent to a vet, which I don't know how we might interpret that. C1 and C2 allow those.
Mhm.
Outdoor kennels are allowed in A and RA right
Mhm.
now, which is a significant area in the city. RA1 is big. There's a lot of parcels within
So if we
city
went for
limits.
rezone to RA1, then the dog kennels would be allowed as a permitted right in that.
I don't.
Yes, they are, RA1 says outdoor kennels. I looked through.
I see.
Oh, excuse me. It's the same thing where it
Says
says
a clinic
veterinary
with
clinic
kennel.
with. So in the
Yeah.
C zones where it's allowed, it says veterinary clinic with indoor kennel.
Mhm.
And in the agricultural and residential agricultural, it just says veterinary clinic with kennel. So
Yes.
I would interpret that as being
Yes, I see.
not.
As opposed to, yes.
Yeah.
I see.
And
Thank
I
you for that
think what
clarification.
The reason for that is more the kennel use was more of a secondary or accessory use.
Yeah.
To the vet.
Mikkel, do you have anything?
I
other-
do. Are we defining kennels as? Are we defining kennels as a commercial operation or like a private operation? Is the term kennels defined in your ordinances already?
Within the
Yes.
definition section it is, but doesn't
It
go to that
doesn't
depth. It
designate.
talks about number of animals. So beyond that, if you were as a kennel to be operating, this is.
Yeah.
I know we all have fur babies, of course, but between daycares and there's kind of a similar aspect of, is this a private situation or is this like a business situation? So if you were to receive a business license or you're conducting business, that would be a general business license, therefore commercial activity. If you privately own more than 4 dogs in the city, there might have to be a interpretation discussion there of, are you a private kennel? Or are you a person that has more than 4 dogs?
Be that 4 dogs are allowed, more than 4 dogs are allowed. in the city.
Well, you're defined as a kennel at that point.
Yeah.
Again, if it's really hard within our code.
Madison, are you a vet?
I just want to, we are looking to
Yeah.
revamp our code. So
Yep.
there's a lot of antiquated
Exactly,
elements
yeah.
such as this that
That was kind of
leave
my
us
point.
standing where we're trying to find firm ground to make determinations and really tough interpretations.
Yeah.
But if the ground under us is unstable, which our code doesn't leave us with many options, we do have to make some of those hard calls.
I would say with this being in the industrial zone, could be easily considered commercial.
I would recommend that as well, that this would be a commercial use. Yes, kennels are considered commercial use. I tried to give the more political answer. The short answer is it's a commercial use. Yes.
Well, one comment you made that really makes sense too, is that nobody hardly knows we're down there. We're out in the middle of nowhere. There's no drive-through street. You know, people make a mistake, think they're gonna get to the river down our road, so we
All the
get
time.
cars once in a while.
Yeah.
But it's like out in the middle, I mean, at the outer skirts of Moab, that people don't go down there for any particular reason. So what better place, you know, to be able to have out of the way indoor kennels rather than closer to city limits.
You know, and the other options we have is a restaurant, that won't work. you know, a brewery's not gonna work, you know, there's,
Can't have outdoor seating.
you can't have outdoor seating out there.
But the storage units work.
Yeah.
Storage units.
Just not, you're just wanting more and bigger.
Or just
An option.
feasibility at
Well,
all.
It's not even
The
feasible
lot
because
is
of the
too
size of the
small.
lot.
Yeah,
Yep, and then once this becomes a site plan, you know, she has another obstacle that hits her, which is, you know, she has to dedicate a big portion of her land to the right of way.
Mhm.
So then her acreage falls. So if you put maximums, minimums, you know,
Yeah.
on storage units, I mean, it should just be, in my opinion, in our opinion, just subject to a site plan and what can fit on the lot.
Yeah.
Rather than the size of land.
Yeah.
Because like we mentioned, somebody could put 10 storage units there and that could at least help 10 locals store
Mm-hmm.
their gear or.
Or their boats or whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I think we have to realize and think about it, this site plan,
Totally.
because, you know, whoever submits their site plan, then it's up to everybody to decide if that's an agreement. or not.
Yeah. And anything developed there would have to meet all the city code requirements too. So,
Correct.
But any changes made affect all. Correct.
Industrial,
cities
that's
throughout the
correct.
county.
Yep.
It's not just specific.
Carolyn, Jill. Putting you on the spot.
I know, right? I'm not gonna talk a whole lot.
Jill just had a
but-
tooth procedure.
Root canal about 2 hours ago. Uh, my,
Maybe just what's your
yes.
temp?
I know, right? Well, I know that we're getting ready to do the overhaul, so I have to agree with that because I hate to hastily put something in the zone that may or may not be good for the whole. So my inclination is no on the kennels. I mean, I love dogs and I'm all about that, and I know we need that, but kind of just quickly put it in because you know, at the last minute, I really think that that's, since we're doing our overhaul, that's when we address our zoning codes so that we can get it right. And the reason why we're doing it is because we haven't gotten it right. So, that's just my initial thoughts about that, so. But
And
I'm
what's-
all
what's-
about the storage units.
Anything about the things that with the proposed changes within the storage unit requirements that,
like the cross outs and things. or,
yeah, anything that you might tweak or leave in?
So just to clarify, do you own all that property? Okay, so you just have all these funny shaped lots that are
No,
done.
Oh,
no,
no,
just
they're
that, no.
just that
Uh,
corner parcel.
You're just
That
the
corner
corner.
parcel.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
all right,
Just the corner parcel. there.
okay.
And what would be the odds that ours would ever be changed to residential or anything? I can't imagine our lot. being
No, yeah, I know
changed.
exactly where you,
Yeah.
it's at. No, I think who put in the reds? Did the city put in the red then? The
Right,
staff,
yeah, so in the staff report, there was,
that's
they were
what you
expressed
guys-
as articles, but you'll see that they're expressed as, here's what we want.
Mhm.
So the proposals are the staff interpreting those articles
Yeah, I like it.
into active
Mhm.
language, which is in some cases purely a red line, meaning
Mhm.
it's striking that language, and some
Striking it,
is
mhm.
that red text, which is the addition of text to support whatever the article was.
Okay. I like the way that it is.
Carolyn?
Yeah, my thoughts, I think that the storage unit amendments make a lot of sense, and thanks for suggesting the thoughtful edits. I don't think that it would significantly change the nature of the area or add excessive traffic. And I agree with staff's recommendation to hold off on adding kennels to the zone for now. I think similar to others, and given the nature of the public comments that we received, that it merits a little more thoughtful consideration and not kind of rushing into it with the code rewrite coming up. And that all the conversation around kind of the awkwardness of the I zone currently, and that it could use a lot of attention during the code rewrite. It's great opportunity for improvements.
yeah, just to better understand its purposes and whether it's fulfilling the purposes of its current zoning and how it can be better amended given the nature of the surrounding areas too, and some of the challenges that you've faced through this experience.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, Mikhail.
There's a variance process for things in the city. People can request a variance.
Yes, a variance
That would be.
follows
surprising.
an appeal, similar to an appeal process. Variances are typically designed around particular criteria, meaning that what actually would have been a possible action is if there are certain zoning parameters or restrictions that eliminate viable use of a property, and that's usually in the form of cliff, floodplain, flood zone,
Mhm.
elements of the nature of the property that we say, oh, if here are the conditions, here's what you have to do, make it an infeasible application of use, meaning they can't use it. And this is a third party process. So this is what is different. I think a lot of people in the public often are going to consider variances and that's a technical legal term. What people are often thinking of is an exception.
Mhm.
The planning commission or the city council can grant certain exceptions if they've been designed within the ordinance. Within our current ordinance, exceptions for something like this are not framed. So a variance could have been applied for, but it would have had to meet strict criteria and then gone to an appeals officer, third party up north to see if that variance qualifies. So we would often recommend a staff recommendation. I haven't reviewed this in a variance context, but if they were to come and say, we want to do a self-storage and we can't because of these parameters, I'm not sure they would meet the litmus test of that criteria for a variance, but that's a
But there's
great
a
question.
process for that.
Yeah.
There is, yes.
And Utah State has some really strict guidelines on
Mhm.
variances. So, yeah.
Good question. Let me see. I have a clarifying question just for my own. So I agree with everything the other planning commissioners are saying in the staff recommendation. I think I've just sort of said that already. I think absolutely remove the requirement that the total area of coverage can't exceed 50%. I think that is speaking to a large lot size that's called for.
Mhm.
It's just a weird requirement to put on your property, honestly. I don't think it makes sense. Same with the buffering requirement where you're adjacent to the I zone. So like the property that would be to the south and to the, well, I guess the treatment plant as well, but the property to the south and then to the east. It would get rid of those side buffering, but you would still have the frontage one, right?
25 feet.
Which is 25 feet.
So what you're saying, Kaya, is you would say no buffer at all, not even
No,
5
but
foot?
I think the 5 foot, because that allows I think the landscaping, I like what's in there now. Again, weird that it applies to the self-storage units only, but yay trees. Sure, it makes good sense. It helps with noise, it smells.
All the shrubbery?
Yeah.
trees and
Someone,
A nursery?
I will say as an attorney, I'm very curious about the history of this portion of the
Yeah.
code because it seems like weirdly specific. Like, what's the legislative history here on this?
I think that there is one. I don't think
Yeah.
we're prepared to,
For sure, yeah.
or with the institutional memory to
Maybe
go into that, but
one
I think
city
it's clear
council
and there
wants-
are, like we've said in the past, and this has been on record a couple of times.
Yeah.
As we've gone through our ordinance, we see horizon updates, which are usually in decade increments
Mhm.
of kind of bizarre but similar characteristics sprinkled throughout the code.
Yeah.
So every 10 years, changes are being made and you can say, ah, that was probably one of the 93 changes. Oh, that looks like one of the 2015 changes because of the nature of the community at that time. And I think this meets the standard similar to some of our other overlay districts and some of our other zoning tight regulations that we've seen on particular uses. So like I said, there may have been people attempting development in the community at that time, and the council and the community felt, hey, we really need to lock in on this particular use and get it sorted.
Somebody really wanted those storage units buffered.
Yes.
And also Kaya, just to let you know, we needed to just stick with what they were, what they had, suggested for us or
Yeah.
wanted. But you guys do have the ability to add any additional recommendations
Correct.
that you want.
And I
Yeah.
do have some notes that I sort of typed into what the staff
Yeah.
did. My one note was that I want to maybe talk about the minimum and the maximum acreage requirement, whether it's recommending the proposed change, which is getting rid of them entirely, or maybe having a conversation if there are better parameters we could put on it and why those might be needed
Mhm.
before we just sort of
Just get rid of
get
it,
rid of
the
it.
whole thing.
I'm generally not in favor of minimum or maximum lot sizes for a lot of things because I think it hampers stuff, but if anyone,
Let's
staff,
this
if there
all.
was a reason you can contemplate that we might be missing, I just want to make sure we're
Or
talking
I-
through it.
Well, that was actually something that we in the applicant team had
Oh.
covered as a possible proposal option and feel at least at this time, in this context, and especially how we're going to be proposing many adjustments to the rewrite, that is a use parameter metric that was popular. It was a popular use, again, in one of those decades.
Yeah.
Of coverage. We don't deal in coverage as much anymore. We deal far more in mitigation aspects.
Yeah.
Especially given the fact that we have a finite amount of developable area in our community that needs to be utilized as to the maximum of value. Now, that doesn't mean maximum coverage.
Yeah.
I mean, maximum value. We
Yeah.
need to be in
About sensitive to how well property is being
Yeah.
used and how well things are developed
Eh.
and laid out and, you know.
yes,
that type of thing.
encouraging wise,
Mhm.
practical development, not we have generic metrics proposed
Yep.
throughout that subjectively may be a hindrance or
Mhm.
may not make sense in a particular scenario.
Cool.
So that's something we said, rather than moving it down to a 1 acre minimum,
Mhm.
let's remove that and make sure that whatever it's developing as develops well
Yes.
versus.
Which is,
uh,
I think, where my
Okay.
one maybe proposed, not necessarily compromise, but tweak maybe, is that to me, when thinking about storage units, the maximum horizontal ground coverage area is more meaningful than up when it comes to storage units. So completely getting rid of the minimum and maximum lot requirements, potentially even getting rid of the buffer when it's adjacent to other I zones. You still have the setback from the right of way, which is something that they'll still have to deal with,
Mhm.
which is getting rid of
Mhm.
the property. You can put trees there. Hopefully they're putting trees there,
Mhm.
but taking the zone height down slightly. 40 feet is quite high.
Mhm.
Thinking about what is in the I zones now, because I think the building where there's welding on the street, your neighbor, either one or two over. Do you know how tall that is? Is that 30? I would venture that's 30.
No, but
I-
back to Corey's point that someone could build a warehouse there for tire recapping and they could go 40 feet high.
No, I understand. I just want to talk about in the context
Yeah.
of like what's in the zone now.
Yeah, where
Um,
the Holland's built, where
yeah.
their bit shop is,
Yeah.
it's gotta be a good.
Okay. My one proposal would be just literally just because we're looking at, because this is such a finite zone. Honestly, it exists in 3
You
places.
know how tall is the sewer plant?
I'm sorry.
I don't
can you
think I
ask
can,
that
I don't think I
question?
can.
How tall is the
have an
sewer
estimate.
plant?
What's that height?
Oh, I don't, yeah, I don't.
I don't think I can, just because we're on, I don't have an I can make a guess, but
think
having
it's taller
spent time
than
down there.
And I also
Yeah.
want to, I will say, I want to make this something that if we make a positive recommendation is likely to get through city council too.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I do think that's in your best interest and I do think
Mhm.
that might be a bigger lift. And so we want to make sort of the best presentation possible. And I think if we honestly get rid of the buffer requirement when it's adjacent to the same zone, get rid of the minimum and maximum lot sizes, but say the height limit is 40 feet for structures. You could have a 40-foot boat
Yeah.
because it's not a structural thing that will be emitting light, that will be a permanent fixture. I don't know what world that exists in. If someone has some sort of Lake Powell mega yacht that's 40 feet tall, they could store it there. But as far as permanent structures on the site that potentially are emitting light downward, that does matter, I think, in that area. Because you do have the building next door, which has its spots that go down and you can see you could see those from my old house. I'm just wondering what
The only, if I might quickly. Given the context of the amendments being proposed, meaning the applicant's amendments, is almost a similar argument to the kennel in this aspect. If we're discussing now a zone level
Yes.
amendment, it may be wise to wait until the rewrite. So I understand, of course, with this particular being at the front, we're kind of wanting to solve that problem now. And this is, I think, coming from our,
Oh, no, I'm still just talking about storage units.
and that's what I mean,
Yeah.
is from the development perspective, this was contemplated, community development perspective, our larger department that is intact now through the city. The idea of bringing all uses within that zone to the height limit allowed in that zone was the recommendation.
Mhm.
So factoring in particular limits associated by height limits by use can be something we look at, but it might be something we want to look at with the rewrite. I know we are looking,
Yeah.
right now is carving down on basically a particular use. This
Yeah.
could be, again, still a mitigation piece. So I'm not saying recommending away from it, but from the staff's recommendation, we may not be recommending that additional aspect the commission might be recommending. just for
Absolutely.
Clarification.
Yes, and
Okay.
that would be something that maybe I would throw out as a recommendation, and I think I do see weird as all the weird requirements for the self-storage is. Thinking about self-storage units and the fact that you are likely to have a little bit more lighting and security 24/7 because of the nature of what that use is, and you are gonna have high point lighting going down. That was mainly my reason for thinking about permanent structures, what's there, how high it is, and what kind of light it is. Even if it's dark skies, it's downward facing. But I think that would actually make a substantial difference to the area as far as light. Just not light trespass or anything
Sure,
illegal, but
just-
just light.
Sure.
And for the wetlands too. I'm the person that's like, what about the birds?
And when you think about, when I was considering height limits and why
Yeah.
those limits are in there, because of the small area, maybe they want to do a double decker.
Yeah, and I think 30 feet would still allow a double decker, but I don't think it would have the honestly, the sticker shock a little bit when you're looking at the code change of like, oh my gosh, 40 feet. What can you
Yeah,
have?
and that's just another thing that's really challenging is that you have two of your big industrial zones are right next to RA1.
I know.
So, that's like, but C3 and, they can all go up to 40 feet or,
Yeah.
residential can go up to 30 feet.
30,
right?
yep.
So, but in
Yeah.
in the storage units, it's no higher than 20?
Yeah.
In the industrial zone?
Yeah.
Like some of it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
I agree.
Want to be sensitive to the area, but also like looking at what's realistic in an industrial zone. and
Totally.
what's-
So with that, again, this was one because it was a pre-discussion.
Mhm.
And again, coming from, and I keep doing this gesture of from up here, it's because it isn't just our planning staff. that
Did
was
God
making
tell you to
these.
do? Corey?
Yeah, there's more, Summer was up there, no. Administration and then the larger perspective of house staff, the capital S staff.
Yeah.
Was wanting to pursue this, so. Striking it or having it consistent, at least because we have it in a mitigated way, if you're not adjacent to a residential zone, it shall comply with the underlying zone district was what we had recommended. Now, this could be an aspect that if the applicants and the commission find, okay, we can all get on board with 30 feet.
Mhm.
Staff is the one that said 40.
Yeah.
That could be something brought forward as a mitigative aspect, maybe somewhere in the middle where,
Yeah.
as opposed to where and whatever the number is, 30, whatever you want it to be. I was just throwing
Mhm.
that out. But that again would be a sound recommendation that the applicants could amend into by the time it goes to city council,
Yeah.
so that it doesn't just have to be a planning.
And even if
recommendation.
you don't want to, we can still make a recommendation I think I'm a little confused why we.
We're gonna handle these in 3 categories. So
Yeah.
the commission can say whatever it likes.
Say we forward
The
a positive
applicants can forward it.
recommendation with the amendment that, no. we
Yeah,
can say-
to modify, so that option
we
for a
can modify.
modification.
Yep.
Of the plans will be the positive
But city
recommendation.
council, if the applicant does not agree, would still see the original proposal with the 40 feet.
Correct,
Yep, okay,
but they'll see yours and the original.
got it.
So whatever,
And Luke will have the pleasure of articulating all this to the rest of the council members. Um, okay. Yeah, I think that was my one thing, because all the other stuff aside, very weird. The height, the 24-hour lighting, just of a storage unit, just for security, particularly in an area where you're not getting people walking by a lot or driving by. Just wanting to be sensitive to that in the zone, and so bringing bringing that in line with what I think the existing heights tend to be in that area. And then what's in the residential and RA that's everywhere else around there. So it wouldn't be like, and I really don't think that would happen, like the towering 40-foot quad storage unit.
What's the residential area around me?
It would be the RA,
Across
which
the
is
street?
across the street. Yep. So
That's pretty far away because there's that
Correct.
huge field in between.
Yep,
us. Okay.
correct. And then, but you're pretty, I will say you're pretty close. You've got, it's the county that's down the road. There's county and then it's city
And
again.
again, I, in this context, like,
Yeah,
what's my adjacency? Well, we're all within a stone's throw
Yeah,
of everybody. here.
exactly,
So I think when we're saying adjacency, especially in the community, they feel like they're right next
Yeah.
to you. It's like, well, in
yeah,
reality, there's a number of properties and
Yeah.
even zone differences
Yeah,
between
like-
maybe them and the industrial zone. So on paper,
mhm,
there maybe are those separations of uses and changes. Most of it's still maintaining a legal non-conforming residential.
Yeah.
But at a build out, maybe there is that buffering separation that ought to be intended, but to your point, we're so small that no matter where you are, you will see lights if somebody is developing.
Yep.
I mean, the ball field
Yeah.
lights, I'm sure, extend.
Look at Marcus
far.
Court and the Hyatt place.
Yeah.
I mean, that's towering lights shining straight down on that neighborhood. I mean, so it's, even if you have a highway in between you,
yeah,
yes, I mean, there's C3 or C2, right, or C3 right behind that neighborhood, and a highway. And
Yeah.
And this is actually on 3 sides industrial and another side a right of way.
Yep.
And the majority of our industrial, even on King Creek Boulevard, you're gonna be, that's all
Mhm.
again,
residential
just that
on one
note,
side
let's
and residential on the.
Remember, we're talking zone wide, so it could be zones that are immediately adjacent to
Yeah.
other residential zones. I know that's hard because again, we're talking about such a specific
Yep.
context, but from the commission's perspective, remember, this is zone wide.
Yep.
Keep that in mind.
And
yeah. I
we
think, I
did
think
put
my,
in-
oh,
we
go
did-
ahead.
Sorry, we did put in the recommendations that if you are adjacent to residential, then the lot, then the road
Totally.
would be a lot more strict.
Absolutely.
20 feet.
20 feet.
That'd be 20 feet.
Yep, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, just for my part, I think my, maybe it's the discussion, maybe it's an actual recommendation we make. To me, with this particular use, because there was a height restriction that was different from everything else in the zone.
Mhm.
Rather than getting rid of that altogether, maybe making it something in between that's way feasible for buildability, but also still is sensitive to the fact that there's a lot of different stuff really close together and what exists in the zone right now. And maybe that is during the code rewrite, everything comes down to 30 feet in the I zone. I could very much see that happening. And so it's kind of also with that in mind, but that is me. Y'all are different.
So
So,
I just want to clarify, Kaya, you're saying that if it's next to a residential, you want it to come down, or are you?
no, I'm just saying in general.
general,
Yeah,
okay.
for leaving that specific requirement for storage units in the I zone rather than striking any sort of height parameters for it.
Altogether, so I'm
saying-
fine with the
changing it
30
from
feet.
20 to 30.
I'm good with 30 feet. How
Um,
does everybody else feel?
So 30 period
30 period for,
versus this
Storage.
staggered approach, which is you're adjacent to
Yes,
residential.
30
It's 20
period.
or it's
Yeah.
40. You're saying just 30.
30
across the
period,
board.
because you
Okay.
can have a 30-foot house in the residential zone. So I do think that makes sense why you shouldn't have a shorter
A diff-
commercial use next
different-
door to a 30-foot house. So that would also account for the other areas where that could happen. Cause I'm trying to think like, cause I know it's hard, it's not adjacent, but like at my house on River Sands, looking that way, you can see the taller welding building that was next door to you. You could see the light from that. But I think where it might come in, where you might get a lot more issues, honestly, trying to get this through would be if there was something about that you could then see.
Isn't
from all
that
the
just a
places.
street light in front of their building?
They have lights on the back. I don't know that they're like, dark size, but
Probably.
Either way,
Oh. Yeah, because I know there's one big light right up there because it shines in my bedroom. But I thought that was just a street light. That's the only light I was aware of.
I
Yeah.
think there's one that faces east
Okay,
too. Yeah, at least part of the time.
maybe for security for them or something.
Yeah, I think so. So, I don't know if others, how you feel about that, but everything else, I'm
Good with that. Yeah, I'm good with the
good
other
with
stuff.
that. I think a height limit for. Wait, let me see. What are you saying?
And I know I've lived in areas when I was in Las Vegas and they had a big problem with them building that big Red Rock casino because it blocked the scenery,
Mhm.
you know, and so I thought it's really is kind of still some pretty area down there.
Yeah, it's
But,
beautiful.
but like I mentioned before, it would never bother me to have a bigger, that sewer plant is so unattractive.
You know,
And the gentleman that stopped by our home to check on my mom once, because he wanted to know how she's doing, because they used our property to keep all their stuff while they built.
oh yeah, the back part, yeah.
He said that we were told we would never hear anything or smell anything. And he said, that's right, they're not doing it right over there. That's not how we built it. He said, you shouldn't be smelling anything. We were told when they were gonna build it, it would be underground. And so we thought, oh, that's no problem, because the other one was pretty bad, but. Yeah, so I think
Cause it used to be across the street,
it
right?
was, the old sewer plant was way down farther.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and then when they wanted that property to
Yeah.
included theirs, and they moved it over right next door to us, but,
Yeah.
and you know, when I looked at the requirements in here with all the shrubbery and trees, I thought, why did the sewer plant only have to have two trees? Nothing's being blocked there. They have
Yeah.
2 trees.
Yeah.
And tons of weeds.
Hmm. Oh, God, I know.
So it's hard to walk down there, ride your bike. Don't ride your bike down that road because you're gonna get go-aheads in it, but. Yeah, it's not maintained very well. I think this, you know, the road's not maintained very well, taking care of the weeds and everything else. It needs a lot of beautification.
It does.
know.
It does. I know. I used to walk my dog down there
Yeah.
every single day. Yeah. Picking the goat heads.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
They're worse now because I don't live there anymore. That's my story.
Flip flops.
Uh, okay, wait there. I'm trying to look at my notes. So I guess, yeah, I think all the modifications that the city staff have made in the red line, but with, rather than striking height limit of buildings used for a self-storage warehouse and having it default to section 17.36.060 for the height limit of the entire zone is 40 feet. And also striking, if it's next to a residential zoning district, then the height limit shall be 20, just saying the height limit of buildings being used for a self-storage warehouse in the I1 zone is 30 feet would be my proposed change, and the applicants can do that as well before taking it to city council if we forward a positive recommendation, or they can just have our discussion on record and
Yeah.
figure it out.
I think
That's fine. Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, because the acreage is so limited that,
Yeah,
you know, that was the issue, but
it's more like I want y'all to be able to go out more
Mhm.
than as much as possible, because that
Exactly.
really does it really makes sense there. Gosh, if you got the adjacent property and you could,
Mhm.
you know, there's potential. Oh boy, any more discussion or thoughts or anything, it seems like everyone's kind of on the same page as far as the kennels.
I
And
feel
we
like we are.
apologize for that.
We respect that.
I
I think it's just a matter of letting that nonprofit know that we're gonna have to stay searching for their new home. So just know that that's.
yeah, they
something
really
we need to
needed
find them.
property. I think COVID really made them real problem with all the rescue and,
Yeah.
you know, so they do such a good job and they just.
I don't know who specifically you're talking about, but I can guess. So.
Yes, I mean, we all have one of their dogs. So yeah, we just love to,
Totally.
love it if this location could work for them, but we respect that it's not the right time.
And financially, try to buy property out on the highway.
It's just
Oh,
so
yeah.
unattainable.
So
right now.
yeah.
Financially, it's
Yeah.
really helpful to people that could buy our property.
Oh, I understand.
And we felt like it was off beaten path enough that it would be a good fit, but
Yeah.
if that's
Yeah,
not possible right now, it's okay.
yeah, it has to be a unanimous good feeling for everybody.
Well, thank you for appreciating that. And again, we are just making a recommendation to city council. City council, can do whatever the heck they want to. So.
Change the name of the dogs to livestock.
Well, that was my first question, of course. Was the dogs qualified as livestock?
I will say, it seemed like talking to folks, in the neighborhood I used to live in, and then the letters we got, the biggest thing did seem to be that, like, that really is a weird little pocket of like beautiful silence, and despite whatever the uses, existing uses or potential could be that like, that was the biggest hiccup. And I get
You
that.
really,
having
really
lived
have to
there.
take into consideration a lot of the other uses that are allowed on that
Absolutely.
property that could
Absolutely.
really, really disturb them a whole lot more
Totally.
than dogs.
Yeah. No, I completely get that. All right, should we? Somebody else? want- Maybe I'll just do it.
Go ahead.
Any other, Mikkel, were your questions sufficiently kind of answered and
I don't
figured? Are you
know. I take
comfortable?
my text amendments very
Yeah.
seriously. I feel like they need that workshopping. I feel like they need that input from lots of public, not
Mhm.
just two.
Yeah.
I feel like any kind of text amendment needs more consideration and more discussion than just the hour and a half that we have. So if it were up to me, I would. Am I making a motion to send an unfavorable recommendation?
We're just discussing now.
Okay.
If someone makes a motion or if you make a motion, we can discuss that motion.
Okay.
As well. But I want to get like
Yeah.
the temperature before
More,
we do
more
motions. Yeah.
discussion. Okay,
But this was also open to public comment.
right.
Yeah, and that, I mean, and that often, and
And we did notify by mail all of the property owners that are industrial zoned as well,
Mhm.
so.
I tried to reach out to people that I knew that were in the area just because it was a zone wide and so there wasn't gonna be something posted.
Mhm.
But still, it will still go to city council. There is not a public hearing, but the city council at their pleasure can still take public comment, have that be a part of their consideration.
Correct.
And I don't know, Luke, can you welcome that? If people who are,
I mean, people are always welcome to send emails to the city council.
or to speak at citizens.
Well,
Week.
yeah, and well,
It's not
technically
the
citizen
public
heard
hearing.
is an opportunity for citizens to make comment of items not on the agenda. So the best way, if an item is on the agenda that you'd like the comments to be made to city council, is to submit that in writing,
Yes,
which will be observed and maybe possibly discussed, but certainly read.
thank you for the.
I must
clarification.
not have been around too many indoor kennels because I'm trying to understand where all the noise comes from indoor kennels.
I don't think with indoor so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
And
thinking about, like, the
in
vets and
Moab, how
stuff.
many dogs are they gonna leave outside? Wouldn't they keep them indoors?
If we're talking about the current nonprofit, I think we're talking about, there's quite a
They're
bit that's
outside all the
outside,
time.
yeah. Which I think might be the vision that folks have in their head, and so
Okay.
maybe in the code change and the rewrite,
Right.
sort of re-envisioning what that looks like. But, okay, any more discussion, I just want to make sure. Okay, I will motion, oh geez. Okay, I move for a positive recommendation as recommended by staff. I move that the planning commission forward a positive recommendation to the city council on ordinance number 2023-13 to amend the text in the I1 industrial zoning district section 17.36020 A24 for self-storage warehouse as proposed, and modify the proposed ordinance to exclude the permitted use of kennel, and also modify the proposed ordinance to include a height restriction for the self-storage use at 30 feet in all scenarios.
Yep.
Is that sufficient?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that, Kaya.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Now would be the time if we have discussion or amendments or just expressing that that is a no-go is totally fine now, or we can wait till the vote.
Mhm.
And we just need a simple majority of commissioners in attendance.
Correct.
For this to pass. Any discussion? Karen's like a deer in headlights. This is new for a lot of us, so.
Well, I just wanted to say that I like the amendment that you made with the height restriction. And I get where you're coming from as far as Moab is not really good at public comment. And so we won't get a lot unless they're like somebody super passionate. So because it was open to public comment and it has been addressed, I think what we've heard is what we're gonna hear. And, but that's just my opinion.
Oh, no,
So
we'll definitely hear
it's-
more
but,
after something
you know, after
changes.
something changes is when everybody comes out. But that's when I think because,
Wait, because it's
know.
already happened.
it
and so
has,
I
it's
think
happened.
Especially when we're talking about setbacks, especially when we're talking about things that bump up against other zoning.
Yeah,
We
Mhm.
need to take time and consideration and ask all the questions.
absolutely.
And ask all the questions maybe a second time
Mhm.
and not just leave it to an hour and a half of discussion.
Right.
On a Thursday night to
Mhm.
change things for everybody's industrial.
Mhm. Go ahead, Corey.
just
Go
a-
ahead.
Council.
Procedural,
Mm.
comment there.
Mhm.
We're obligated to follow procedural process for this applicant, given the submittal process. So, if there are substantive or subjective
Mhm.
aspects, those are the findings that I think would be associated with a negative recommendation.
Mhm.
But procedural defects in or the lacking procedural is not I think a grounds for a negative recommendation, but that can be something that is a comment or incorporate. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Absolutely.
So you say our process needs more,
Right.
so a negative recommendation wouldn't really reflect that.
Right.
So, but I will take note of that.
Mhm.
Given these are state, mostly state organized, when we do the rewrite, we'll obviously evaluate
that's what
what
I was getting
additional
to.
opportunities we have, because we do have the authority to
Huge.
generate more opportunity, through that procedural process than what is required, but it has to be, in codified. It has to be a codified process.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to, is that I think that as this sits, I like it as we move forward in the future. That's when we address any deficits or
Yeah.
changes
Mhm.
elsewhere.
Mhm.
So, but and just because we recommend positive doesn't mean it's the city might change their mind. Absolutely.
Well, and what works for my property, being industrial, might not be the same for another industrial property,
Totally.
because they have residential next to them.
Right, next.
Yeah.
That's why we try
Yeah.
to be very specific about,
Yes.
caveats in there
Yep.
that if you are next to residential.
And I will say that I'm a big landscaped buffer fan with different zones. That is retained with this. And again, and I think, Mikkel, I appreciate it. If we were talking about R2 today,
Mhm.
this would be a long process.
Yeah.
There are two spots in the city where this zone exists, and I think it is easier a little bit to conceptualize what we're looking at.
Right.
So I'm less wary of making small tweaks to right now.
Yeah, and the only setbacks that were changed are directly to the exact
Yep.
same zone.
The exact same zone, exactly. So
And if you consider C3's lot line to lot line.
Oh, yeah.
C4's lot line to lot line.
totally. Okay, we have a motion and positive recommendation. We've had some discussion. So I think procedurally we should take a vote on the motion. If that fails, we can hear
Yes,
another motion.
Correct.
Or an amendment.
correct.
Cool.
We can do a roll call. We can do an audible. I'm comfortable in this position, but
Let's do
whatever
it.
you'd like to
Let's
do.
do an aye or yay or nay.
yeah, sure.
Sure.
Would you like to call that?
Sure. So, it's weird because it's my motion.
Uh,
I'm not used
Sure,
to that.
sure.
I'm used to somebody
I
else
can do
doing the
that.
motion.
I can do that.
Yeah, why don't you go?
Okay.
ahead?
Everyone is still aware of the motion on the table, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I,
Any abstentions? Any opposed?
Nay.
We have 3 in favor, 1 opposed. The motion passes.
Great.
Positive recommendation as proposed, advances to city council with the modification.
Correct. Yeah. So then I think now, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, other commissioners. That was a really good discussion. Hopefully it gave a lot of fodder for city council. I wanna
No.
just say that I think where we are now is we have our recommendation. You still have your proposed amendment as you originally wrote it and
Mhm.
proposed it.
I do have that the applicants in this discussion have accommodated that,
Okay,
so I will have
okay.
the modified 30 feet also reflected as a amendment made when it goes. to city
That's what I
council.
wanted to confirm, if that was something you were comfortable with actually amending on your.
We can
end.
also discuss with the applicants and staff if there are that or any other amendments. So they're not locked into that like we are.
Okay, cool.
They can continue to be flexible and propose whatever they'd like to city council,
Great.
so long as it's in the main frame of what it was discussed tonight.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're
Really-
welcome. Thank you for your time.
And I really hope someone will buy your home and use it for something good.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping too, but yeah, it'll happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still nice. We
Yeah,
still enjoy.
I
where
know.
We're at.
That's the thing. It's like, I just, colloquially, I love that part of town. I don't live there anymore. I miss it. I would take the treatment smell over like the highway noise any
Yeah.
day, honestly, that I have now. So,
This is for people who grew up here and being
Yes.
family property.
Yeah.
and having it change so much.
oh,
and
totally.
Thinking you're selling a
Yeah.
home that has,
Oh, God.
you know, you can put another house here, you can do this, you can do that, and then to find out that it's just beholden with it.
That was
A
kind of
lot of problems.
That's
plan,
fun,
'cause my
yeah.
nephew was gonna build a home.
Oh,
when my
yeah.
mom was there. My nephew wanted to build right next to my mom,
Mhm.
but yeah, I know. I was telling my husband today, what do you think my mom and dad would think? Cause my dad had, he had, a record, and storage that, yeah, he had his records. He would store the cars out there that he towed in until people would pick them up. And at one time we had cows and horses. And
Mhm.
so there's been a lot of difference on that.
Which are
property.
still right next door in the Bastions property. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Really.
No, thank you.
Thank you. This was a long meeting and
Well-
we appreciate your time.
Oh,
Well, I
man.
appreciate that too. Hopefully in the future, we can figure out something else too for the kennels, for the
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah, no, I
Such a
know
need.
the community has an interest in that for sure.
Right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Hope you feel better.
Oh, yeah.
It's the running joke. It's gonna be what's wrong with Jill today?
Or
The
I'm
planning commission
sick,
meeting.
or-
Okay. Next, we have approval of minutes from our August 21st special meeting that we held. Oh,
Mhm.
any,
I'll make a
Questions,
oh,
review?
sorry.
no, go for it. No,
I was
Jill.
gonna say, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of our August 21st, 2023 planning special meeting.
Great. Second from anyone?
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion to approve from Jill and a second from Mikkel. And any discussion, questions? I'll just do all in favor.
Hi.
Aye. Minutes approved unanimously. Next we have item 6.1, a discussion item, which is, here we go round again. Amendments to outdoor lighting requirements, the dark sky update, discussion of possible future amendments to the MMC outdoor lighting requirements and updates to the dark sky standards.
Might I request a short recess?
Yes, I would
Granted.
love that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Maybe
We are gonna
2 minutes.
take a 2-minute break.
Perfect.
Yay.
Yeah, my gosh. As long as I'm not drooling, I'm okay, right? Oh, gosh. Make sure I'm not.
Check your face.
So it's Mikkel, is that correct? Correct. So you were on the card, was it Las Vegas, Arizona? No, in a very small town called Thatcher. Thatcher, Arizona. Mhm, that's right. Yes, rural farming, mining. Really? Anyway, yeah. So you were on the commission there. I was. Nice, yeah.
Then
That
the-
you bring a lot.
I, I like it. I like that there's
My
lots of
husband grew
different
up here.
opinions and it's
Yeah.
okay to have them and that's impressive to me. Yeah. Mhm. I think that's good. Lots of different perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah. It's benefits.
How long have you been on the planning commission?
Let's see, in December. Roughly, I think it's December, January.
Nice. Wow. So, well, first.
Yeah, is it your first time seeing this? Joanne, neighbor. We were somewhere. Remember where we were at the college, like opening house. Do you want to be in that? Like, okay. She's like,
Wow.
"Yes." She's like, "Okay." Yes, I am.
Who's gonna be your new neighbor?
They come to people, look, no buyers.
Yeah.
I mean, at that price.
I'm gonna buy in that house.
I have my neighbor's house vacant too,
Oh,
at unachievable price.
Yeah,
I looked
she
at
is,
that by the
hers is
high school.
extremely unattainable pricing.
More than.
Secret
more than
Cove?
25.
You know where Secret
What?
Cove is?
7?
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, like across from the height, across from YGP, there's that little
Oh,
cul-de-sac,
yeah.
like very large houses. That's
Yeah.
one of the ones for sale.
When you
1.6.
drive in, 1.7.
It's actually a former planning commissioner's house.
Yes. Yes, and so.
You too can have a 1.7.
I lived there for 1 point.
Goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been in, it's a beautiful house. I've had many a cocktail hour in that house.
Well, we won't convene until all the commissioners are back. Well, as we're back now. My hope is to keep, I think we have 2 discussion items. I will keep them very brief.
Thank you.
I will let the commission, I think, drive at least any additional commentary on this first time. So we'll
Great.
pick us back up. You've introduced this item, so I think we can just
Sure, go for it.
re-enter back into this item. So this is a reintroduction discussion for the possible future amendments to the outdoor lighting requirements, our dark sky code
Mhm.
update. This had been something we've been working on for a little over a year, but with precedent taking with the landscape ordinance, we've kind of had this put onto the back burner for a bit. So many of the amendments that were expressed in the packet as far as red line have been discussed by commission already, but was something that we were wanting to introduce prior to even a workshop, just so that it was on the agenda, it was on the record, giving the public, again, additional time to process, generate maybe some commentary to be discussed at a workshop in the future. We'll be coordinating with Alexi and the Sustainability Department to advance this. There's multiple components here. One, we have an existing existing outdoor lighting ordinance subject from the IDA dark skies parameters, geared towards the application process for us to be a certified dark sky city. So we've been in that application process again for, well, about 4 years now, and trying to get the final stamp of approval on that. However, every year that we've been continuing to try to make that possible, that, and to no fault of IDA, I'm not blaming for that, but the finish line continues to move further away. So we're having to not only catch up to where we want to be, but also chase the additional requirements that they continue to add every year. So this, to my understanding, we had coordinated with Richard Laurie, who at the time was a Sustainability Vista, is now on staff, helped planning generate what were observed deficiencies in the existing ordinance, to resolve those prior to us being kind of considered a complete dark sky.
Mhm.
Major aspects of this are redefining directed illumination versus direct. I know that we won't get into the details now, so it might not seem like that big of a difference. As well as certain levels of exemption, and what I'll kind of call the 3 legs of the dark sky stool to uphold this ordinance is essentially the temperature at which lighting is regulated, Kelvin regulation, fixture regulation, so fully shielded fixtures, and then lumen and lumen output. The lumen output has been a continued challenge for us. I think everyone has been able to advance temperature and fixtures pretty effectively, but lumen output on particular use areas is kind of a moving target and also a somewhat ambiguous attempt because nobody has a good idea really of what is a sufficient amount of lighting for a certain acreage proportion. I think there's a lot of opinions around that. We've generated and I think boxed it in as best we can. But what we have found, basically considering they're in the development context, amounts of light that are required and then amounts of light that are what we're calling amenity. And what we might say this, you might ring some bells, is our cookies and carrots discussion of things that you need and things that you'd like to have. But even within the carrots, things that are required by other regulations, we're already exceeding what our caps were. So again, we're having some perceived deficiencies even within the construction process. So that was one of the major fixes we were hoping to attempt to find there. I'll go ahead and pause now. Well, okay, one last plug. This is a minor piece to this ordinance, but it is going to be one of the more maybe controversial. So it's a minor piece, but it will be controversial, is the aspect of bistro lighting. Now, we've talked about this before and vetted through, again, multiple iterations of the city, but essentially bistro lights are prohibited as the text exists now. What we were trying to advance because of the call to address it through the community is allow them with mitigation, as what we're trying to approach many things is regulate down on the encumbering factors or things that we don't like, but allow the freedom and flexibility to do things in general versus just blanket prohibitions. So those are the main amendments, I would say. And obviously there's a lot more redlining going on that factors into all those pieces. But if there are any comments right now we'd like to talk about or give staff direction to bring back to you of, hey, this doesn't make sense, I'd like more information here, anything of that nature would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think making it so bistro lighting is such an incredibly popular for commercial and residential properties. I would venture that 30% of Moab has bistro lighting in some way on their property. So like the little globe lights on the strings with like the
Twinkle lights,
Twinkle lighting.
bistro lights, fairy lights.
very nice.
If you think outdoor patio,
Like backyard patio party.
Yeah.
Yep.
Would
Commercially or just across the board?
Across.
across the board,
across the board, which because they are not downward shielded, are not compliant with
correct.
the overarching dark sky
Right.
components.
And that means just not having them at all as opposed to like turn them off at 10.
Exactly. So mitigation, I
Mhm.
think, is what we're
Mhm.
trying to carve out. Forgive me if I'm missing that. What would that mitigation be potentially?
Time of operation,
Mhm.
scope and ability, or what is being used for.
Yeah.
Particular zoning, where that zone, where the use of those. So again, for commercial patios.
Yeah.
Maybe they're operating that patio until a certain point.
Yeah.
In the evening. We'd be looking at how that works. If it's a 2 a.m. bar that has patio lighting, are we still turning them off at 10?
This is Utah, so those don't exist.
Well, we're gonna grapple to, excuse me, but like, we're gonna grapple to some of those 1 or maybe 1.5 uses we have left.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, it's elements like.
Yeah, temperature makes a huge difference too.
Sure.
I will say,
I think lumen output.
Yeah, lumen
is
output,
also,
yep.
is a big factor. We're seeing full on light bulbs versus what had been historically like
Yeah.
almost more Christmas light.
Yep.
I mean, maybe slightly bigger, but the lumen output or capacity of these, and they're all kind of converting to LEDs now too. So there's more to think about that has probably even evolved from last time we spoke about this,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
the idea that this is something the city wants, both residents, commercial, everyone wants it. So
Yeah.
it's, okay, can we fit this into the dark sky context in a way that makes sense? And essentially across this whole board with commercial use is, if we're observing dark skies, I think we have to find and strike that balance of, we might not get to view our dark skies all the time, meaning it's 8:30 at night in the summer and you'd be like, well, I can't see the stars. It's like, well, yes. So, but if that's the true pursuit, so we have our ecotourism, we have dark sky tourism, we want to create that and
Mhm.
build that. But the idea maybe being that, okay, there's a time for light and then there's a time for dark.
Yeah.
Factoring in maybe that capacity gives,
Yeah.
like in our trails community, a place for motors and a place for not motors, that type of a
Yep.
thing.
Yeah, I think time limited
Mhm.
makes very good sense. And there's other things that are already time limited as far as illuminated signage and
Mhm.
all those kinds of things that are compliant with the, like you said, with the mitigation that they have. Would it just be a matter of matching the shut off time,
Managing or matching?
matching?
We'll have to look into
Yeah.
it a little deeper because there
Hard.
are some not to be cute strings that can tether out from this.
He's proud of himself.
That if you get into a particular what if for a particular what if property,
Yeah.
we could have
Yes,
40 different versions of mitigation
Yeah.
for string light. But what
Yeah.
we're gonna try to keep it to is a reasonable level, which may be per zone or
Yeah.
per even category, commercial, residential two, or maybe there's three of high commercial, low commercial.
how
which
do
is
the
what I think we have
smokers at
proposed right
Woody's
now.
still have their bistro lights at 12:30 at night?
Yeah.
That's what we need to figure out.
Right, that's right.
Cool. No, that sounds good. What else do we need to? I mean, maybe. Fine. Guess what else do you need from us this evening?
For dark sky,
Yeah,
I think that's it. It's really to reintroduce, have you be familiar, so that when we have a workshop next time, it isn't the very first time you're maybe seeing this still rough draft,
Yep.
but we're building that. And again, not so much just for you, but also for the public. Anybody watching saying, okay, I can see this building.
Right.
great. That,
And then
Unless-
we do have one other item.
yes, which is, future agenda items. Or wait, do we have?
We have one
possible
more
amendments?
discussion item. It's a lightweight discussion item.
Possible, 6.2 discussion possible amendments to, Moab Municipal Code based on previous priority discussions.
Again,
Oh.
super brief now. We've been through these a number of times before. We had a full workshop session on these. Since then, we've taken those back, categorized them into even finer or finite categories. And there are maybe a few more of these that the attorney will glob onto as far as structural changes and more statute-based amendments. But basically, as far as the quick review, and I didn't include anything packed these, it's still very rough draft of what we're working on, but high priorities that we're being looking for prior to the big code update, but things that really need to be changing as soon as possible.
Yep.
That includes hard surfacing for parking for intensive residential uses in residential zones. Driveway separation standards,
Yep.
again, minor things that are updating. Traffic parking circulation analysis for number of driveways required. So when we have larger projects, rather than utilizing a collection of a bunch of different codes, we have our own code that will dictate how that's supposed to be organized. And again, many of these are coming from the engineer. Consolidation of existing open space requirements. In previous reviews of the code, we've been very familiar now with the fact that there are multiple code sections governing the same thing. And so where they should have been removed from the code when the new ones were codified, they just left
Mhm.
the prior code. So now we have conflicting code in that way. Planning application lapsing period. This is to refine better because we just don't have the explicit language of somebody submits an application. There are certain rights associated with that through the state, but unless they're advancing, they can just in perpetuity have this active application. So we don't have any actual period to halt that. Something, it'd be like a year is a typical
Mhm.
standard. If you don't talk to us in a year, we're going to
Yeah.
consider your application lapsed.
Yeah.
It may even be something sooner with the application because vesting is a whole different category, but fence height, a lot of these, I'm communicating with the community development director, and he is really, really wanting to push as many of these to the rewrite as possible. Anything that can afford to wait, he really wants to wait. Fence height, might be one of those. That was early on. We just kind of categorized as it's kind of an easy lift.
Mhm.
It's not crazy, but it's one of those things that once it's proposed, it'll be the worst thing in the world for everybody. But right now, nothing's proposed, so it's like, well, maybe we push that off.
Corey,
Um,
what is the timeline for the full rewrite?
We're working through the RFP drafting process now. We're hoping to have that out issued, and then we'll be going through the review and I guess what would be a approval process through city council for that, for the budget. And then we'll actually get to work. So that whole initial process will probably be what I'd say is optimally 2 months. I think the community development director was saying he wanted to get out by the end of October.
The draft you sent me, it had initial interest by next Friday.
So I mean, we're trying to move quick, and that's one of his priorities. So it will
So
go
just
quick.
because we will be seeking an entity to
Right.
spearhead that process.
Right.
But
Of
once the
rewriting it.
Consultant is brought on.
Yeah.
Is there an anticipated timeline, like rough ballpark?
Of the consultants coming on.
No,
After,
the
for
whole-
like
the whole
between
process.
hiring a
done.
consultant
Yeah.
and to have new code.
It will probably not be till the end of next year.
Yeah.
So it'll be a long work process. It could be as short as 6 months, but I think as long as a year from date of action. So time is of the essence.
So you guys actually came out at a very, depending on how
Oh,
you look at
really
it, very
good
exciting
The
time.
council and the mayor are extremely activated about,
Yes.
and so is the city manager about advancing this. So that we are excited about that.
And those of us who have to wade through weird sections of the code about self-storage warehouses and industrial zone are also very excited about.
So I think with those, there are a few others, but I think as we're
Yeah.
reviewing these, I think those are gonna end up getting on the back burner, even some of the more intensive ones like a fee in lieu for parking.
Yeah.
Sorting that formula out,
Mhm.
that might get kicked
Is
because
there-
it's a slightly more complex.
I know
question.
there's like internal prioritization reasons, within the planning department. Maybe I would just flag that like, if we see a lot of things happening that are likely to be moot by the time the code is changed in a way that we wouldn't prefer today, maybe those are the things that get bumped up to the top. Like if all the fences are gonna be built by this time next year already and it won't matter anymore.
Right.
Maybe that's one that we want to do.
It's a hard one, but that's I think what we're trying. We know
Yeah.
there's an immediate period that we're
Yep.
trying to deal with. And I think we have full backing to pursue those. We just have to identify
Yeah.
what we feel that those are.
Yeah.
Obviously, like I said, from the attorney, there's a number of state code updates that are immediately important.
Yeah.
Processing wise,
Yeah.
just not on our end, land use wise, but functionally that we need
Yeah.
to be up to speed with. But then a couple of these that they have the ability to unravel a couple of things, and that's what we want to fix.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
immediately, but we're open to those. So if we, through our development processes or site plan reviews, you're identifying this is not what we want.
Yeah.
Let's be aware of that and you can
Like, it's
inform
gonna be
us
a
and the
runaway train
commission.
by the time we
Yeah.
get to it.
But that's it. So I can kind of cap that and say that's what we're looking at more or less now. We'll come back to you. Kind of like we did with Dark Skies. It'll be an intro level discussion item with a little bit more material and then we'll
Yeah.
maybe come with a workshop. And when we've workshopped it, we feel confident, we'll move into that public process.
I'm very excited for the, like I was saying, the community engagement aspect of this,
Mhm.
of the like banging the
It will
dog
be-
of like, speak now
Yes.
or forever hold your.
At least they were given an opportunity.
Yeah, like
for
a
sure.
big, but it seems like at least based on the RFP draft that I saw, that we're really, I mean, that's a huge component of hiring
Mhm.
someone to manage the process is like
Mhm.
public, how are you gonna dynamically engage?
And how
citizens in the process?
comprehensive we're hoping it
Yeah.
will be.
Yeah.
That does remind me, we can talk, I'm concluded with that item if we want to move on to future agenda. items.
Yeah, we're done. Future agenda
okay.
items.
Really quick, I'm sure we're all aware that the city council did approve our landscaping ordinance at their past meeting. We are very excited about that, and I thought really great discussion happened. I think we've gotten a number of compliments, so not to us, but a number of compliments at the ordinance and the way that that discussion unraveled was really well done and
Good.
good civic process, and I concur. There were hardball
Thanks for
questions, hardball
Holding the torch for
issues.
us, Luke.
I thought it did get to the heart of some things that we still need to figure out. But anyway, I thought it went really well. So with that though, there were some last minute aspects that we're going to be reviewing as far as water feature, particularly waterfall and wind shut off. So we will be bringing that back to the planning commission kind of on as quick as a turnaround as we can
Okay.
to have it, because it will have to go through a full text amendment process again, just for that little update, but it's got to go through the process.
The
So
rest is there already.
it's there. So it'll be
Okay.
a minor update to an existing text amendment at that point. And it's really going to come in the matter of like a minutia of framing. So
Yeah, that's fine.
it won't be too heavy. I think everyone has said their piece about the ordinance, whatever they want to say, but
Jill didn't attend when she was ill for nothing.
Right?
Coordinated illness.
Yeah.
and we have now, I'm so sorry it's taken this long to do, but we want to
I know, I
introduce
almost said something at the
Bryce
beginning.
Rogers, our newly hired assistant planner. So happy to have Bryce on
Welcome.
staff.
That's
And
also
really
why I'm
quick,
quiet, because I don't really know what's going on yet.
I had some administration during the meeting texting and chatting like, who's the other person up at the dais that we, I'm like, we'll get there, I promise. Had to cover a lot of those items with that.
So say your name again, please.
Bryce Rogers.
Bryce Rogers, welcome. We're very excited to have you.
Thank you.
So I don't have anything else, anything quickly from staff, any other updates you'd like to provide?
Cool.
Okey doke. Thank you.
Thank you all. Meeting adjourned at 8:11 PM.
Thank you, Kaya.
Thank
Some
you.
full meetings. Miles missed a good one.